Hello, Global Theater. My name is Gerry Fialka. Today is April 23, 2025. Want to thank Rob Grant, his amazing podcast, I'm Probably Wrong About Everything. Also want to thank Jay Paulson for his poetry series at the Book Jewel. And that's where I met today's guest, William Wolf Foss. Is that right, Foss?
That's right.
And we're going to call you Bill. Is that cool?
That'll work for me.
Bill, you're right here at the Fialka Funny Farm. So let's just jump right into it. The first question is, what is the best thing for a human being?
To feel unreservedly loved, to experience that to where it's almost overwhelming.
Yeah.
I've had that wonderful experience a couple of times in my life. There was one time that I was about to get to move to Northern California to get married to my first wife. And a bunch of my friends threw kind of a surprise party just to tell me that they cared about me and loved me. And I was surrounded by so many people, and I literally was having difficulty breathing, and I felt like the world was spinning around me. I was overwhelmed with love. I was in a sea of love. And I felt that again recently. I'm a cancer patient, and the people who have come to me from family, from friends, colleagues from my work life, and have just been so supportive. It's what's made me make it through a very tough year.
Wow, that is so articulate. Let's just make sure this is rolling properly. That is so cool.
I woke up one day in the hospital and in the dark room at 2:00 in the morning, looked, and there was my younger daughter across the room, just sitting and watching me over like a little guardian angel.
Yeah.
And I said, "What are you doing here? Do you need a lift home?" She said, "I'm just being here with you, Dad."
Oh,
and it felt so good.
Bill, what's your favorite form of information, how it comes into you?
Man, you ask good questions.
Oh, thank you.
Because I had to think about that. I deliberately did not watch one of your interviews because I wanted this to be utterly
fresh.
Let's see what Gerry is going to do. My favorite way of getting information is seeing and hearing it with people.
Yeah.
And that could be at a lecture. It could be watching TV with friends. If there's something on TV that is informative and intelligent and that the friends and I will talk about afterwards. It's not very often solitary. I like being around people and the interplay of information that happens after you do something compelling, after you go to a good discussion or a fine dinner or a play or concert together.
We kind of call it direct experience, but that's really, you're really concise and you're articulate, and I appreciate that. Why do you think humans collect or gather information?
To make sense of the world, and frankly, because of the fact that it benefits them.
Yeah.
Those who are better at getting information and learning from it, at putting together connections and distilling something out of it, they will do better in life.
Yep.
One of the things when I'm teaching is I teach how adults learn and how it's different than how children learn. Children, it's called pedagogy, and children are little sponges. They absorb every piece of information, whether it's useful to them or not. Adults are much more critical. Theirs is called andragogy. And andragogy is you've got to give them a bridge from point to point, from piece of information to piece of information, and give them an idea as to how it all comes together in a whole to give a fusion, something new.
Yeah.
And that's where they retain the information.
Wow. Is this need or want to collect information more innate or more invented?
Certainly, we can see that there's sometimes that you will have twins growing up at the same time in the same family with the same background, with the same teachers, with the same parent, and one of them will have a dramatically different personality and set of life outcomes than the other. You've undoubtedly seen this in your world. So there's something that must be innate. It is not all nurture. There's a certain amount of it that has to be nature.
Yeah. Do thoughts create emotions?
I think it is our response to information or thoughts that create emotions. Although thought and emotion can, in some respects, be the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're getting into that. So fill in the blank, Bill. I don't know what I think until I.
Oh, that goes way back. How can I know what I think till I see what I say? Haven't you ever, at some point in your life, found yourself saying something and say, where did that come from?
Yeah.
But also, we have to say, how can you know what you think till you see what you do?
Yeah.
Because humans are great at fooling themselves about what they believe. There's a tremendous amount of people who think of themselves as being generous. Well, what are they doing for other people? How much are they giving to charity? Where are they volunteering at a soup kitchen? Are they generous, or are they telling themselves that they are this good thing that society expects them to be? We're good at pulling the wool over our own eyes sometimes.
Wow, I love that saying. That's a subgenius saying. Well, McLuhan says, I don't know what I think until I say it. Joan Didion says, I don't know what I think until I write it. Can humans think without language?
Can chimpanzees think without language? Now, chimpanzees, come to think of it, have language. That's been proven. So do dolphins. So do whales. But let's take it down to something that probably doesn't. A lizard. Is a lizard thinking, or is a lizard simply reacting to its environment with a set of essentially reflexes? I think that there has to be language to put things in an internal context, even if you're not sharing them with others.
That's amazing, because I'll ask you a quickie side question. New Yorker magazine posed this question a few issues ago about, can babies actually dream inside the womb, or is dreaming require being outside the womb?
Let me think back. No, I don't remember. I don't know these things.
I know, but your hunch.
I know babies can dream when they're even very young. I've heard a baby laugh that was only 2 months old.
That's outside the womb. But what the article was delving into is, do we need experience in order to dream? And, you could never answer the question, but it's just, neuroscientists kind of probing whether the baby has dreams, or does it need to be outside the mother's womb to have dreams?
There would be I would guess that there would be such sensory deprivation, a lack of change in the womb, that there would not be a terrific amount of brain activity except for the reflexive limbic system saying, heart, keep beating.
Right.
Other than that, I can't see that there would be enough of a stimuli to make it so that would happen. Imagine, though, since you've brought it up, what a flood of stimuli must happen to a newborn baby. All of a sudden, the temperature changes. It's no longer wet. You're no longer connected to mom with the umbilical cord. All of a sudden, the world is out there and noises are happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it must be interesting being born. I'll have to try that again one of these days.
So my favorite Captain Beefheart came out and says, I'm going back in. Womb service, as Robin Williams says. Okay, so Chomsky says a language is not just words. It's a culture, tradition, a unification of community, a whole history that creates what a community is. Bill, what do you do when language doesn't work? When language breaks down, what do you do?
Give me an example of language breaking
Say
down.
you're at the store and you're trying to communicate with the clerk and some communication breakdown. What do you usually do?
Well, be creative in terms of how you can use objects, pictures, pen and I almost always am going to have a pen and paper on me.
That's good.
These things are supposed to be mightier than swords, so use them carefully. But I've drawn a few pictures in my time and had people figure out what I meant. And I've used primitive sign language.
Yeah.
Or, of course, there's the, hey, does anybody over here speak Armenian? Because I don't, and this guy does. And so, ask for help.
Yeah, ask for help. I love it. Your observations of humans in general, are we more thinking beings or more feeling beings?
That depends very much upon the individual, because I have known people who were almost walking meat computers, who almost never showed emotion and very seldom started sentences with I feel, but more often I think, or they're very analytical. I've known others who were not at all in the analytical side of things, but seem to be driven by their emotions. So you can't say generally, because of the fact that there's such a difference in between how people experience the world and reveal themselves to others.
That's such a great observation, because here's what I usually say, Bill. Most people, 80% of people, answer that question, I think we're more feeling beings. Now, we think because we invented the word thinking and feeling, we can separate them. They're probably so connected you can't even separate them. But Bridget Bardot says, when I make love, I don't think. I'm like, good luck. How do you turn your brain off? And people who meditate go, now think about not thinking. There's a bumper sticker on a car on my street. It says, don't believe everything you think. And I go, well, you could say, don't believe everything you feel.
Feelings are so often genuine in a way that thoughts are not.
Great. These are two questions from Alan Turing in the 50s. One, is thinking a function of the soul?
I would say no. The soul is more about values and how some decisions are made, than an analytical process. Although not all thinking is an analytical process, of course, but I would say that the soul is doing something different.
The second Turing question is, can machines think?
And my answer has to be, so far as we know, not yet.
Yeah.
But the possibility that they could is not completely out of the realm of thought. Computers get more and more powerful and more able to put things into context. And eventually, there might be the possibility that one would have, either by design or simply by accumulation, the ability to think of itself as I. And the moment that a computer thinks of itself as I, then it has a personality and it has independent thought.
Yeah. Do you more pursue happiness or more pursue meaning?
I am in pursuit of happiness and have found meaning along the way in doing that. And in many respects, the things that give life meaning to me also give me happiness.
I got the question from Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. He says that happiness doesn't tend to last and meaning does last. Any thoughts on that?
I can remember moments of happiness from when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Happiness can last.
Yeah.
Can't everybody remember some time that you were just so happy to be alive, to hold someone in your arms, or to have some achievement, or to be where you were, seeing what you were seeing.
Yeah.
I will never forget climbing to the top of a hill in Athens and standing on the Acropolis and looking out over the ruins and the new, bright, shiny, tall city. And that will give me happiness for the rest of my life. That moment, I can still throw myself back and I can remember what shoes I was wearing and what the air smelled like.
Nice.
Greek air smelled
Wow.
good. There was a guy just down from me carving gyros. So there's moments that are always going to stay with me. And I think other people must have those things as well.
Indeed. Does the brain more detect consciousness or create it? Like, is consciousness there bubbling away and we're more so detecting it or more so creating it?
We are not creating consciousness because of the fact that that would make it so that we would have to start one day thinking, I think I'll be conscious today. It is a state of being.
Yeah. What's faster, speed of light or speed of thought?
Given how long I took to answer that question, I'd have to say light.
The poet Audre Lorde said, you can't dismantle the master's house using the master's tools. Yvonne Rainer, her colleague, said, oh, you can if you expose the tools. What new tool do you suggest?
If the goal is dismantling the master's house, start off with getting a good blueprint of the master's house and finding out what it is.
Yeah.
And determining whether you really want to dismantle it, make it better, or figure out what your end goal is. But understand what you're dealing with is always the first step in a process.
It's really
learn
good.
about the master's house. Get the blueprint.
I love it. Understanding blueprint. Okay. What new toy do you suggest, or what's a toy you gravitate towards?
My favorite toy right now is a dog about that big named Louise, and she's a what's called a puggle,
Yeah.
half pug, half beagle, and she just delights me and brings a smile to my face every single time that I see her. If you happen to be on Mr. Internet and put in Google Images Puggle, Puggle, you will get a horde of little cute dog faces smiling at you. And they're irresistible. My wife wanted a dog. I did not want another dog. And she said, just come to the shelter and look at this dog. She'd seen its picture online. It looked nice online. We went to see that dog, and in person, that dog was no good.
Oh.
It was skittish, and it looked like it was going to snap at me. And it just, no. Well, before we went, I said, I don't want another dog. And if we do get another dog, so already I was giving up. Okay. Yeah. And if we do get another dog, I don't want it to be a little dog. And particularly, I don't want it to be anything like a Chihuahua. What do you think we left with? A little dog that looked rather like a Chihuahua. So my plans are not necessarily set in stone. I love that little beast. Now I have two dogs. I love them both. But right now, the little one is my favorite toy.
Oh my God, that is such a great
Now,
story.
I do have a new toy. My brother got me an electric bike, an e-bike.
Oh, yeah.
And that has been just a ton and a half of fun. Every little trip to the grocery store is enjoyable. And of course, it's environmentally a good way of getting around. Really but good. Feeling the wind in your face and piloting your way through the streets, that's my new favorite toy, down by the beach and in parks and places like that.
So well put. What do you worry about when you go to bed at night?
I don't worry much about really almost anything. I worry a little bit about leaving my family without me, because that's the possibility it'll happen. There was a, now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep if I should die before I wake. And I occasionally think that if I should die before I wake.
Yeah.
But that's one of my main fears, is to leave them alone. They've indicated they don't want that. For some reason, they like me. Don't know why.
Oh, Bill, you're a great guy. What do you mean? Come on. Okay, so McLuhan learned from the poet Ezra Pound that artists are the antenna of the race. They're broadcasting and detecting the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, so we might learn how to cope with what we don't like about our inventions. So, Bill, I asked you the question Marshall probed his whole career. Why do we ignore the hidden psychic effects of our inventions, even though the artists are broadcasting them to us?
Not all the effects of our inventions are good, of course. And we like to focus on what benefits us, and also not swim too far against the overwhelming stream of consciousness. If you really examine, are we happy in America working the way that we're working? And I say working because we work a lot. We, as a nation, spend a lot of our time working for other people and putting aside money that we'll never spend, and or scrambling for money so that we can spend just enough to keep hand to mouth and to maybe move up on the ladder. We don't really look at how much we work compared with other countries, other ways of life. South Sea Islanders, before the Europeans got there, are estimated to have spent about 2 hours a day getting everything that they needed, and the rest of the time was their time to play. Now, they didn't have much in the way of possessions, and in some cases their cultures were not as complex. In others, they were, certainly with Hawaiians and Maori, they were very advanced in terms of some pretty big concepts, but they didn't have to work hard every day to get there.
Yeah.
You look at Europeans right now, and the retirement age of someone in France is closer to the mid-50s. And from there on, it's enjoy life.
Wow.
You watch the way that the French and Italians live their day. They get up, they work for a few hours, they nap, or they have a good, slow lunch.
Yeah. Smart.
Thoroughly enjoy it.
Smart.
And then go back. They work until a little later than an American would, and then a good, slow dinner. They spend less time with their nose to the grindstone and the shoulder to the wheel, and more at the kitchen table and with friends and playing chess and drinking wine. We don't like to acknowledge sometimes how hard we work, and in some respects, how little we get out of it. It goes against the grain. The American way is to work, 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 work. And we don't necessarily say, what am I getting out of this?
Yeah.
Am I getting happiness? Am I getting fulfillment?
Yeah.
Am I getting the things that I want and need?
Yeah.
Will I look back on this day at some point as one in which I had a fine moment with my family, or just as another day as a drone?
Yeah.
How many people, when they look at how much time they spend doing things they like in a day, it's less than an hour.
Yeah. Wow. Do artists have moral obligation?
Depending upon the art, I would usually say yes. Now, if you're an artist that paints still lifes, still life of fruit bowl with cat knocking fruit out of it, or whatever, it's hard to put a lot of social meaning into that. You're painting fruit and a cat. Now, if you're trying to make a television show that reflects some aspect of life, okay, yeah, you've got a responsibility to use that art form in a way that is meaningful, or at least isn't doing damage.
Yeah.
So there are types of art that you really have a responsibility to do something with it.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the art of Salvador Dali as an example, now that's someone who goes way beyond your still lifes. That's someone with some strong philosophies about the world and his place in it. There are certain artists, Marcel Duchamp and Dali and Picasso, who are consciously saying things about the world. And of course, the Dadaists of France in the 1920s were definitely making statements as part of their art.
Yeah, it's really important. Are you more afraid of old ideas or more afraid of new ideas?
I have no fear of new ideas so long as they are compassionate and realistic.
Yeah.
We are going to get new ideas as we get new technologies and ways of living, and as the world changes. I'm a little bit concerned about some of the old ideas that seem to be coming back that I thought we had kind of buried around 1945.
Yeah.
But there's most of the time I would say that I'm open to new ideas and not particularly in fear of them. I would hope that an educated populace would be able to make good choices when faced with them.
Yeah. Can you conjure up your earliest memory ever, or one of them?
My brother and I laying together in a crib while my father read the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam.
Wow. What is memory more a curse or more a blessing?
Blessing. There are moments in my life that have not been pleasant, that have even been painful. I can barely remember them.
Yeah.
I know that they happened intellectually. I can't remember much about what I felt at that time. I can remember when someone I deeply loved told me that they were breaking up with me. I can remember a little bit of
Wow.
how I responded to it, but not my exact feelings.
Yeah.
Not in the same way that when the same person told me she loved me. I remember that.
Wow.
I remember much more about that.
Beautiful.
I think we're able to compartmentalize our feelings and sometimes put aside the pain and close the door on it, not erasing it from our consciousness and history, but not feeling it the same way.
Yeah. Tell me someone within your immediate family and like who's sort of like a role model and they had an impact on you. What specifically was that impact? Just briefly.
Well, in my immediate family, my twin brother.
What did you mainly get from him?
He has reinvented himself as needed and as opportunities arose, to where I really admire the way that he has taken something and got other people's buy-in and made it happen, made it real.
Wow.
He never took a journalism class in his life, but he's been a working journalist for over 25 years.
Yeah. Wow.
He was with a science fiction convention, and people were coming from all over the world to Los Angeles to this convention. And the hotel had the usual terrible hotel food. And someone said, we need a dining guide for these people. And he wrote one, and he wrote it with, here's this restaurant, here's what they do. He happened to really like food, a bit of a gourmet and an experimental person. He said, here's where it is, here's what they do. This is some, sit on the outside patio, it's quieter, and here's some dishes you might like. And what they asked for was going to be a single sheet of paper. What he gave them was around 15 pages of restaurant reviews. And somebody who was at the science fiction convention apparently passed it over to a newspaper and said, look at the way this guy wrote this. And that started his career as being a paid. And so he's been doing that for 25 years. Previously, he'd run a travel agency, and that was where, again, fine dining was part of it. But he had no background in this. He created it for himself. He went to write a book, and wasn't even intentionally writing a book on the subject involved. He got an invitation to meet with a publisher, and he said, I'm going to do a book on hors d'oeuvres, what you eat before you eat. Hey, there's a good idea. Well, he went to the publisher and said, I want to do a book on hors d'oeuvres. And they said, man, you're like a week late. We had the same idea, and we just contracted with somebody else to do it. But we really like your writing style, and we need someone to do a book on rum. And my brother said, rum, why didn't I think of it? Rum, of course, yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum, pirates, the triangle trade. Yes, I could do a book on rum. And they wrote him a check, and he walked out of the building and said, what am I doing? I don't even like rum. And he wrote a book on rum, and it's over 10 years. It's still in print, and it's still popular. Rum, A Global History by Richard Foss, available on Mr. Internet.
But good.
And it's a funny little book. You wouldn't think that the history of rum would be funny, but it is in many places. So all of a sudden, he's a book author.
Yeah.
And he wrote another book on airline food. Now, is there anything that you would less think would be interesting than airline food? How in the world? Well, if you start off with, what was the first food ever eaten in the air?
Don't know what.
With Benjamin Franklin present, it was a bottle of champagne.
Wow.
The Montgolfier balloon that went up in the Tuileries Garden of Paris, with Benjamin Franklin watching, the first manned ascent. Of course, they were French. You had to have champagne.
Wow.
So they had champagne and hors d'oeuvres as they went up. So he starts off with the Montgolfier balloon and ends up in the space station. So it's everything that's been eaten off the surface of the Earth. He just came up with it. Okay, he got the opportunity. One more thing. He got the opportunity of, he'd run house concerts for years, but his living room could only hold so much. And what he was doing was actually not legal. The city of Manhattan Beach was not thrilled necessarily about all of a sudden have a whole bunch of cars descending and a band pounding out. And he knew someone in San Pedro that had a space that they weren't using. And he talked with them, and they turned it into a performance space. And it's been going now for about almost 6 years. And it is a nonprofit that hosts people from all over the world.
What is it, Alba?
It's called Collage. Collage.
Good.
Like in the art form collage in San Pedro. And it has, by the way, I already talked to Gerry. He said I could mention this. It has a wonderful program in which people who have musical instruments that have just been sitting in their garage that they haven't played for years will take the musical instruments, professionally refurbish them, and then give them at no charge to people who need them. When kids graduate high school, they lose the place where they played musical instruments in band. They lose the people they were playing with, and the school says, give the instrument back. There goes their musical career or their musical love. We give those students a place to play, the instrument to play, and some of them have gotten so good, they even have bands that are making money and doing gigs all over the place. If anybody watching this, if you have a musical instrument that you're not using, or if you would like to play music along with other people, we have free jazz jams, blues jams. We're starting guitar lessons, beginning guitar lessons at no cost. Hey, come to Collage in San Pedro. You can go to collageartculture.org if you have a musical instrument you'd like to play, or if you'd like to play a musical instrument and need a place to play it. And we're giving it to people who lost theirs in the Altadena fires, Altadena and Palisades. You may have heard that organizations like Guitar Center are giving away instruments. You didn't hear the fine print. They'll give you a musical instrument if you have the receipt for the one that was burned in the fire.
Oh yeah, like you're gonna have the receipt it burned.
Right.
Well,
exactly.
You are doing it. You are truly making the world a better place.
We
Now,
also do this for cancer patients
oh my
and for the
God,
previously incarcerated.
way to
And
go, Bill.
for anybody who needs music therapy in their life. So he created that, and they've put on about 500 shows since 2020. And a lot of them are free just to make people get together and experience culture. And I tremendously respect him doing that. There's nobody else doing that
It's
kind of thing.
music as healing force,
Yeah.
therapy. So, Bill, the same question, just briefly, outside your immediate family, someone who had an impact, and what was the impact?
Outside my immediate family, there was a mentor to me by the name of Charlie Armstrong. Passed on now, sadly, but Charlie was in the field of occupational safety and health, which is what I teach. And I got thrown into the position of being in charge of that department at a company. And Charlie helped tremendously at helping me understand about that, about the management, how to do it in a corporation, because I hadn't done it for a big company before.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, I was at a Fortune 100 company and put in charge of a department when previously I'd been in charge of like 12 people.
Yeah.
And now I've got a whole department. What do I do?
Yeah.
I'm in charge of teachers from Montana to Mexico, and I need to manage all this. And Charlie was just tremendously helpful, not with just technical nuts and bolts, but here's a good way to lead an employee meeting so that you get everybody's buy-in and you're moving in the same direction at the end of it. Here's a good way to keep people engaged when you can't be in front of them all the time. And pretty much all of his advice was just spot on. He was a wonderful person and very, very patient, and working, of course, for the success of the whole organization. But he certainly made me feel like he had an interest in me personally and in my success as well.
Wow, beautiful. And did your parents raise you a particular religion?
Well, my mother was Catholic-ish, and my father was very much a free thinker. We were exposed to a variety of different ideas, and certainly most based on the Christian religion, but by no means exclusively. We didn't, as I recall, ever go to a mosque or a synagogue just to try it out and take it for a spin. But we looked at different kinds of Christian churches, and in private at home, we had lots of discussions, mainly with my father, the free thinker, about religion and its place in society and whether people really need it, or whether it's just something that helps give structure to their life and that they can have a perfectly structured life without it. And so it helped guide my decisions when it came to adopting or not adopting a religion, and also the way that I've raised my daughters when it came to that.
Do you pray?
No.
If God exists, what would you like God to say to you after you die?
Okay, Foss, I'll start fixing all of those problems that you said we had. I'd like God to do that.
Good, positive attitude, Bill.
But when it comes to praying, you don't talk to an empty room. And if you don't really think that there's someone there,
yeah.
No, the closest I've come to prayer was when my first daughter was born premature, and it was a little questionable as to how healthy she'd be. And I remember standing over, looking at the tubes going into her body, and I think I may have said something like a prayer, but not to any specific deity.
Yeah. Do evil people exist, or does evil use people as a vehicle?
Evil people exist. Evil is not a freestanding devil or demon thing. It is a condition that some people have in their hearts and minds that causes them to not care about what they do to other people, or to even enjoy the infliction of distress and pain upon others.
Yeah, the hidden question really is, Bill, how do you advise someone to deal with an enemy? And Alan Watts says, if you acknowledge your enemy, you empower them. Any thoughts on that? How would you respond to Alan? And how do you advise someone to deal
You
with
keep
an
your
enemy?
eyes open. You cannot ignore an enemy away if
Yeah.
they are trying to actively harm you or others.
Yeah,
If you remain clear-eyed to see what is going on, and if they are going to have a negative effect upon you, then you have to be willing to resist, to say no, to fight back. And if you think that they will have a negative effect upon others, you have to open your mouth.
yeah,
What is the great lesson of the terrible Catholic Church molestation? It is that there were so many people who knew and did nothing.
nothing. Yeah.
And I'm sorry, not merely the Catholic Church. There are too many other organizations. Sadly, many of them religious, which again affects my opinion of religion.
Yeah.
But there are too many organizations in which people knew that something bad was going on, and instead there was a structure set up to protect the organization rather than to correct the problem.
James Joyce was the first projectionist in Dublin 100 years ago. He basically checked out. He said, "This is stupid. Why should I go inside a building and see a movie of a tree when I can go outside and see a real tree?" Years later, Faulkner said, "Sometimes the best fiction is more true than journalism." Why do we have to recreate things in order to get them? Why do we have to go to a theatrical play of people acting out life? Why don't we just live life?
Lived life is, of course, what we're here for, but the theatrical play is going to be designed to bring ideas to the fore, or to make you contextualize, to make you laugh, perhaps. It could be a funny play. It could put the world into a perspective that is helpful. A good play may well have you go out thinking and perceiving differently than when you went in. Or at least it will be a time like the plays of Neil Simon. They had their cutting moments in them in which there were philosophical and other points made, but a lot of the Neil Simon play was simply making you laugh and using language beautifully. So yes, we need that. And when it comes to tree, okay, I can look at a tree. Man, nice tree, cool. Deciduous with, let's see, some little scars on there, and woodpecker's been knocking on it. But a good description of a tree in a book or a poem, and you can smell the flowers that it has. You can hear the rustle of leaves in the wind off the pages of your book. And it is somehow, for a moment, more real than the tree in your own front yard.
Yeah. Tell us the tipping point where you decided to be a storytelling, that storytelling was your calling.
I had been at the Renaissance Pleasure Fair for years, someplace that I had fun and got onto the streets and acted and had a good time and had a great many friends. There was a marvelous storyteller by the name of Mark Lewis, sadly now passed on, who was one of the best things I'd ever heard in my life. Now, as it happens, I had come up with a couple of stories of my own and fiddled around with them mentally and thought of, how shall I express these in a language that people would like to hear? And one night I climbed up on a hay bale with about 20 people around me eating and drinking. At night at the Renaissance Fair, you used to, if we were working there, you used to be able to stay there the night, and there were a great many people who were making and serving food, and there was a wonderful camaraderie. They don't do that anymore. Insurance, they won't let them stay the night. But it was like a little village full of great, creative, interesting people. And I stood up on a hay bale and said, "Friends, something you didn't know about me. I am a storyteller." looked at me like, what, Foss? You? No, that guy Mark is the storyteller. Would you care to hear a story you have never heard before? Now, who's going to say no? And I stood up on the hay bale and I told the story. And by George, they laughed when I wanted them to laugh.
Wow.
And when they laughed, those were my jokes.
Nice.
I came up with them. Nobody had ever made that joke before, so far as I know. Somebody had to have. It's a big world.
Yeah.
It's been here a long time.
But you wrote
but
and told
I
the story.
made that joke.
Yeah.
I wrote it and I told it, and people applauded at the end of it and called for another one. And I thought, okay, I could do this.
That's good, because it's perfect lead in. A screenwriting teacher told me, great art is when you can clearly see the intention of the maker. Kubrick says the opposite. Great art is when you can clearly not see the intention of the maker. What role does intention play in your creative process as a storyteller?
I do not really use my stories to teach. I use them to entertain and to have people enjoy the language.
Yeah.
My role is to be the story, to add drama and inflection so that they can see it happen in their mind's eye. And it's a tremendous fun when you do that and you get that they're getting it.
Yeah.
They're seeing the story.
Yeah.
Some of them are stories that very much are in the world that we know, and others, there's one that I have called The Tale of General McAllen and How He Invaded Hell, where I bring in demons, angels, the devil himself, and I have the place happen, the story happen in various places. I just throw everything but the kitchen sink into that.
Yeah.
And I don't want them to be paying attention to me. I want them to be paying attention to the tale and seeing it in their heads as it comes. That one, by the way, started off with my attempt to write an epic poem.
Nice.
I like poems. I love poetry. As I mentioned, my father, not a highly educated man, but a highly cultured one. He hung around libraries, and he joined the military straight out of high school and was not a spectacular student in high school, but he loved books. And in the Navy, he was always the first to the library. And when ships were exchanging books from their libraries, that happened. If you had a bunch of books on your ship and some other ship, you were sending boats back and forth with supplies and messages and everything else. You take some of the old books out of the library nobody's checked out lately. Hey, we got 14 books. You got 14 books for us? Sure. And he was always first to them. And he introduced my brother and I to the love of literature and language. And the very first memory, as I mentioned, was the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam. But there were books and poetry everywhere, and him reading to us and encouraging us to read to each other. And so we got that delightful experience of being immersed in the love of language.
Beautiful, Bill. Duchamp said there's no art without an audience. How much are you thinking of your listener when you're doing storytelling?
Storytelling is all about the listener. You need the ears. You don't do it alone.
Yeah.
I've tried, somebody had said, do these into a microphone with just you. Oh, I was awful doing that.
Wow.
But getting other people there who had never heard them before, that was an important thing.
Yeah.
And having that and triggering the laughter or the other emotions, that was what made. Now, I can't say that there is no art without an audience, because how many painters paint to an audience?
Yeah.
Sometimes you paint for the joy of making that thing, and you'll be the only person who ever sees it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's McLuhan loved. The Balinese have no word for art. They do everything as well as they can. Similar, but
that's cool.
McLuhan says that everything we invent extends some humanness, like knife and fork extends our teeth. Shutter and a camera extends our eyelid, and maybe even non-tangible, say religion or philosophy, extends consciousness. What does the writing utensil extend for you? Whether it's a pen or a keyboard, what humanness does it extend?
Oh, it absolutely extends memory.
Yeah.
If you're trying to teach people and you want them to retain certain pieces of information, it's really valuable to have that information go through their brain, out to their fingers, and onto paper.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of written tests. I've taught at the college level and have been an instructor in the California State University system.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I was teaching at El Camino College in Torrance. But I don't give boring written tests, but
Yeah.
I do get people to write certain things down because it makes them remember it
Yeah.
in a way that they wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah.
So I would say writing, it does that. And of course, writing in the means of calligraphy and brushwork can take words and make them into art.
Yeah. Well, this is interesting because there's a quote where McLuhan talks about what is the difference between entertainment and education? And here's the context a little. He says, it's like setting up a distinction between didactic and lyric poetry on the ground that one teaches and the other one pleases. However, it's always been true that whatever pleases teaches more effectively. And
Agreed.
then I've asked this to people for years, and no one said this until recently. A guy goes, no, whatever displeases teaches more effectively. Now, basic question is, what's the difference between entertainment and education? In this line, whatever pleases teaches more effectively. Any thoughts?
Difference between entertainment and education is that an education is designed to have an outcome.
Yeah.
Entertainment exists for itself.
Yeah. That's good. Entertainment for itself. Huh. So there's another friend I interviewed who's a writer, and he said there's a difference between story and narrative. Now, it's a fine line, it's just words, but he said an interesting thing. I'm not saying I agree or disagree. He says, narrative doesn't lie. Story can lie. Now, what's your take on that? What's the difference between narrative and storytelling? And is that
narrative has a narrator, and that means you have someone who is saying, from my perspective,
yeah,
this is what is,
yeah,
or this is what happened, or as a teacher, this is the history of the American Revolution. Well, okay, they're giving it from a point of view as a narrator. Story is different because of the fact that a story has to have characters.
Yeah.
And it has to have change and resolution.
Wow.
There has to be change along the way, and there should be resolution. Yeah. There are some things that you can look at and say, and then it ended.
Yeah.
Think of Waiting for Godot. What is the resolution?
Yeah.
Well, Godot isn't showing up, and Vladimir and who is the other fellow's name? Estragon. Vladimir and Estragon are going to come back tomorrow.
Yeah.
And do whatever they're doing while they wait for Godot.
Yeah.
So that's the difference, is that one has a single narrator and the other is involved with characters, development, and resolution.
Yeah. And that goes right along with Eartha Kitt said, truth is a theory that is constantly being disproved. Only lies, it seems, go on forever. So the guy suggesting, well, narrative doesn't lie. Here's the Marcel Proust question to follow up. On what occasion do you lie?
There have been more than one occasion in which someone brought something to a family gathering as a meal offering, and asked, how do you like it? And I will admit the diplomat kicked in and, oh, delightful, I couldn't possibly eat anymore. Well, I couldn't eat anymore because of the fact that it was so bad to start off with. So I think that is a relatively harmless lie. But I might then say, but next time you might want to crisp this up in the oven first, or give some kind of,
crisp it up in the
oh,
oven.
it was so good. But just as a suggestion, you know.
That's beautiful, because the experimental filmmaker Hollis Frampton said, narrative is born among the animal necessities of the spirit because we're waiting to die. My question is, Bill, can you forget to die?
I don't even think that that would be a good thing. There's a limit to how much the human brain can store and process. And I've known people who lived to extended ages, and a few who were sharp and enjoying life at the end. But the majority, honestly, who lived to past a certain point, there are some people who outlive their joy of life. And I'm not going to be likely to end up as one of the ones who is laying in a hospital bed staring at the ceiling and hoping or wishing that someone will visit today other than the attendant. I would not want to live forever. I would not want to forget to die. I am prepared for that.
So McLuhan says every word, all words are metaphorical. And so my question is, if all words are metaphorical, what is the word literal a metaphor for?
Is this pen a metaphor or is it a verb?
That's Bucky Fuller. I seem to be a verb. I would say it's both. Wouldn't you say it's both a verb and a noun?
Now, a pen can be used as part of a sentence or a set of ideas, as a metaphor for a way of transmitting information, or as a symbol of being learned. You look at the coat of arms from the Renaissance and Middle Ages, and if the coat of arms included a pen, why, they had a scholar in the family.
Wow.
But by itself, without that separate outside context, a pen is just a pen.
That's good, because I love to ask this one. It's about Milan Kundera. He said that, in the book Unbearable Likeness of Being, this is why I love writing, because the character I'm writing about can go further than I can. It's like, yeah, right, that's romantic, right? If I take this pen and put a character on a paper, how can it go further than I can?
Well, quite easily. The character on paper could be elected president, and I'm sorry, Gerry, the position's taken. Not by maybe the best guy, but you're probably not going to end up there. Sorry to disappoint your hopes there. But the person on paper could commit some vile and horrible act that you never would. The person on paper might have journeys to places that you couldn't possibly go. So yes, it allows you to extend that thought individual to places and experience that aren't available to you.
What's the function of poetry?
To use language in such a way that it could be memorable or provoke emotion. Because there are some poems that certainly seem to be, and well, the West African griots had poems that were hundreds of stanzas long that were the history of their people. They were, in many cases, pre-literate when it came to writing stuff down, but they were very exacting about making sure that the next generation heard tales from the previous years. There was one in which French scientists were writing down the words of a griot, and they had started to get a little bit frustrated because of the fact that the person had memorized exactly, and this is how many years this king ruled and what happened during his time and this time. And then he got to one, and the only thing notable during his reign was that in the middle of the day, the sun went dark and a circle moved across it. And the French went, wait a minute, you're describing an eclipse that happened 300 years ago. And so while it wasn't extremely compelling in terms of a narrative of someone's life, it gave them information that was usable to target a specific moment in time.
Yeah.
The Icelandic sagas, while many of them are delightful in terms of the people in them and the things that they do, some of them are also quite intentionally information-based and giving. It's not so much about the drama. It's a history book without the book.
Dude, that I heard a woman on NPR, famous author. Her mom was raised in the Bahamas, never read a book. She said, my mom knew what to do when a tsunami hit because of a song they sang. Very similar. That's really good.
And poems also can evoke emotion.
Yeah.
In a wonderful way. They can play with language, and I like poems that rhyme. I know these days a lot of poetry does not, and some of the stuff that I've written didn't, but the vast majority, I was raised on rhyming poems, and so, well, that's what I generally have created. And it gives you, they're a mnemonic.
Yeah.
They're a memory tool.
Yeah.
And they allow you to keep information in an organized way that otherwise you'd never remember it if it didn't in some way have rhythm and meter. People get Shakespeare all wrong because of the fact that the way it's written down, people think they have to treat it as though at the end of each sentence you stop and move into something else. And a good deal of Shakespeare rhymes, but not all of it, of course. And there's a great deal of Shakespeare that might be poetry. But you think of some of the most famous lines in Shakespeare. Hamlet, the first words of the Hamlet soliloquy. Quick, what are the first words of Hamlet's soliloquy?
Shake your ESP ear. Duh, I don't know. Sorry, sir.
Oh, no. It can't be that both of us would forget something like that. The way most people say it. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler, okay, but the way it should be. Because Hamlet is a philosopher.
Yeah.
To be or not to be, that's the question.
That is really a great
because that
illustration.
is what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's considering suicide.
To be space
or not to be. And people get that wrong. There's a lot of things where if they just broke it up into the thoughts, it makes a heck of a lot more sense.
Yeah, or the question. Woody Allen made Marshall McLuhan change his line. Marshall would say, do you mean my whole fallacy is wrong? That's a question. Woody said, say it as a statement. You mean my whole fallacy is wrong? Totally different, but I mean, it's still a half truth is still a lot of a truth. But you brought up what Rex Roth said, the function of poetry is to woo your lover and subvert the bourgeois. And Gary Snyder says, the task of the poet is to see the world without language, then put that seeing into language.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. But here's one I'd love for you to comment on, if you could. This is Leo Bersani, who just passed away last year, on his Mallarmé study. The very crises which threatens the writing of poetry sustains poetic composition.
And I think part of the crisis that threatens the writing of poetry is that so many people no longer write, they type.
Yeah.
They are not taking pen to paper.
Wow.
They are not getting a yellow legal pad and a pen and sitting and thinking and crossing out things.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but it seems to be hard to compose poetry on a laptop.
Yeah.
And there has to be a mindset that
Yeah.
you need to be in. And fewer people are in that mindset than I think is the case from previous years. And you have to start off with some concept of poetry in your life. And we're not doing that. We're not passing on storytelling and poetry. Used to be that when you were growing up, you got the stories of your family. You talk to many Europeans, they can tell you how their grandparents met.
Yeah.
How did,
Yeah.
Okay, you probably know. We're of an age where perhaps this was transmitted. How did your parents meet each other?
Yeah, no, I know the story. I mean, I could tell you.
Right. How did your grandparents meet each other?
Don't know that story. Wish I
Now,
did.
see, before a certain time, that would have been passed down around the fire.
Really,
they would know. We're not doing that, and we're not writing poetry and reading poetry as much as we used to. People are looking more for utility or for either light or deep entertainment, and they don't throw poetry into that context. We need to get the love for this art form back again.
Love for poetry back. Let's just check this out for a second. Okay, is that pretty centered there?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm pretty centered. I'm a little bit off center myself, regardless of where I am in the frame.
You're looking good there, Bill. So what was the motive of the cave artist?
We cannot possibly know.
But I mean, your hunch or your guess.
That requires putting ourselves into the mindset of someone from another planet.
Yeah.
It is, you look at some of the earliest of cave art, and it is a hand against the wall.
Yeah.
Or it is a picture of an animal, or a lot of it, it's geometric or non-geometric shapes that we cannot interpret. What were they trying to say? We don't know.
Yeah.
What did it mean to them? Of course, the easy out for archaeologists, oh, it's ritual.
Yeah. I get that a lot. Yeah. No, my favorite is they were making list. That's one of my favorite. Well, the other one is a good opportunity to serve grape and wine and cheese and crackers. Have everybody over to your cave to keep people in the cave. Oh, I've had a million of them. Okay.
Except for the fact that in many cases, they didn't live in those caves all the time. That was where they went to for refuge, or it was what survived because of the fact that they lived in the much more productive and light forests and grasslands nearby. They came to the cave perhaps for ritual reasons or to bury their dead or things like that. But the thought that people lived in caves, have you been in a cave? It's kind of damp and wet. And it's hard to heat. There are times that that might be the best place for shelter from enemies and things like that, but it's not where you want to live your time.
You don't want to live in an art
particularly gallery. In a hunter-gatherer situation where once you've pulled all the nuts and berries off the trees, you've got to move to some other trees or else you starve.
That's it.
So many people misinterpret the purpose of the cave. In some cases, absolutely. There was ritual going on and we know it. When there's stacked animal bones inside a cave and they're stacked in a pattern, we don't know what that pattern was meant to do, but that pattern was not utilitarian in terms of let's build a chest of drawers and IKEA hasn't been invented yet, so let's use animal bones. That's not going to happen. They were doing something ritualistic at that place at that time. But we can say, yes, there's a cave called Brunuel, Brunuel, in France, where Neanderthals built walls inside caves. out of broken stalagmites. And the
Wow.
walls were not defensive in nature. We can't figure out what the heck they were doing. These were Neanderthals. They weren't even what we would call human, but they were doing something of great importance in that cave.
Yeah.
They weren't living there. There was no evidence that people lived in that place. They came deep into the cave, into the darkness, to do something for some reason.
Yeah.
We cannot possibly say what.
Beautiful. So T.S. Eliot said poetry is outing your inner dialogue. What language is your inner dialogue in?
How is it possible to be analytical and romantic at the same time? I am. I am analytical in terms of how I see many things in the world. But analytics doesn't necessarily make it into the poetry. It informs the way that the sentences and thoughts are put together. But romantic is more romantic and imagistic, trying to make people see something in their minds. That's more where I am.
You're really articulate and concise, Bill. I appreciate this. So what's more important, conviction or compromise?
You must have the courage of your convictions and compromise in order to achieve them.
So you've accomplished a lot. In your accomplishments, how do you rate these three elements, luck, skill, and ambition? What played the biggest role, second and third?
Skill's done a lot.
Yeah.
Luck, you can't get real far in life with a lot of bad luck.
Yeah.
You can get pretty far in life with some good luck. And I have not been overwhelmingly ambitious. I have wanted a few things in my life and been fortunate enough to get a good many of them. But I never was one to dream very hard about the corner office and the Rolls Royce and things like that. I've not had the overweening ambition.
My film heroes say these things like, ignore yourself. There's no self-expression. In fact, Cecil Taylor, the great jazz pianist, says, I'm just a vehicle and this stuff just comes through me. Is art making more self-expression or more your vehicle for whatever technologies, cultures, and environments are dominant?
Art is my self-expression. It is not necessarily about the dominant culture and way of thinking. I see it as something intensely personal. Nobody else can make quite the same art that I do. And I look at your walls covered with art of all different kinds and think nobody else could make exactly some of the things that I'm seeing right now.
That's great. Very few people comment. Okay, on my place, that's good. So, Bill, can art making be egoless?
The artist has to be at the center. And I would say no. Now, I have met, for instance, musicians who are intensely shy and would have other people introduce them because of the fact that they would not even say their own name into a microphone in the name of the next song.
Yeah.
They were brilliant at what they did, and they were not only good technicians, but sometimes soulful in terms of putting the feeling into it. Perhaps that is where their ego was coming out, was through the great expression of it. If you listen to Toccata and Fugue in D minor, and you hear it by E. Power Biggs, one of the greatest of concert organists, and then you hear it by, well, someone else who isn't E. Power Biggs, you really can tell the difference.
Wow.
E. Power Biggs is putting not only the technician, he's putting his soul in there. Yeah. That was his favorite piece of music, and he said he lived more when he was playing that.
Nice.
So
Is
yes, he had an ego, but he was not ego driven in terms of making it about him. Thinking it through, he was expressing his personality and his ego through his performance.
Is perception reality?
What I perceive at this moment is my reality.
Yeah.
Perception can be misled, of course. You are wearing a purple shirt. In the right light, it could look a different color. It looks purple because of the wavelengths of light hitting it right now. In another place with different conditions, without the shirt changing, my perception of it will. So perception is not ironclad. It can be fooled.
Lewis Carroll says, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast. Have you believed in any impossible things lately?
I have believed in a hope for justice in the world that has not necessarily come through. Maybe it's not impossible, but in some cases it seems darned unlikely at the moment. And that is discouraging.
That's discouraging.
The impossible things that Lewis Carroll was talking about, that was with the Queen of Hearts, was it not?
I believe,
that is different entirely because she was taking contradictory things and putting them together. I have in my time believed in some things as being inevitable that turned out not to be.
Yeah. Bill, tell me one major element of your creativeness, storytelling, that's stayed the same, and one major element that's changed.
I am a big believer in laughter and the power of giving people joy.
Yeah.
And in my poems as well as my storytelling, I cannot think of one in which I do not at least once want the audience to unexpectedly laugh.
Yeah.
As to what has changed, I have to admit the spigot got shut off at one point.
Yeah.
I have only created one original new story in the last close to 10 years.
Wow.
And almost no poems. I don't know why. I am open to them. I keep pad and paper around all the time. But the muse took a nap and hasn't awakened yet.
Wow.
And so that is a thing that I am very sad about.
Wow.
But
well, that brings to the next question beautifully, how you can just flow into it. Moshe Feldenkrais works with healing and movement. He says it's literally possible to identify a weakness and incorporate it to become a strength, rather than we're normally taught to overcome a weakness. Tell me a weakness you turned into a strength.
I was not always very decisive in the business world and in other aspects of my life. Dithered a bit, going over, should I do this or should I do that? Will it hurt people's feelings if I make this choice instead of that choice?
Yeah.
And that was a weakness. It slowed down my decision making and undoubtedly frustrated other people.
Yeah.
I got past that and turned it into a strength by saying, okay, rapidly analyze the situation, look at it from the different points of view, look at how it will affect other people, and come to a decision. And then,
yeah,
yes, you made that decision. keep the ability to say, perhaps I was wrong,
Yeah.
and backtrack or change direction. But it speeds up. It was a weakness for me to look at it from so many points of view. It is a strength to look at it from some points of view and then make a fast decision and stick with that decision.
Yeah. Well, it flows into our study on archiving. Etymologically, the word comes from the 1400s, to keep safe, free from harm. 1600s, it's what we know archive as, is a record preserved as evidence. But Charles Baudelaire said, if you try to make a statement long, deep, and rich, it will age very fast. If you try to only own the day you're talking, it will last forever.
Agreed. Because as soon as he put long in there, you said long, deep, and fast. Long is going to incorporate several elements, and if one of them falls through, or becomes in essence obsolete in thought, then the whole statement can, by some people, be disregarded.
Yeah, but that's perfect, because David Lee Roth said, "Here today, gone later today." But the question basically is archiving more innate or more invented, and do you have plans for your own archive? But let me continue to set it up a little. If you study Eastern philosophy, they say, be here now. Live in the moment. Well, if the whole point of life is to live in the moment and be present, then why do we have to save all this crap? And, I know, history, studying that. I go to the library every day, but I also love the fact that the futurists said, burn all the libraries and museums. I'm not doing that, but someone thought it up. Wyndham Lewis, I think, nailed it. He says, artists live in the present and write a detailed history of the future. So do you have plans for your own archives? And is archiving more innate or more invented?
Because I have recently had to face death, I was told when I went in for cancer surgery that there was a measurable chance that I wouldn't even survive the day, and a high likelihood that I wouldn't make it 6 months. So I had to think about my future, and I had to think about what I owned. And there were some things that I wanted to pass on, and I wanted to pass on not merely the objects, but the meaning of those objects, because they had meaning to me. And so I started, okay, this is a Zulu war spear that I got when I was working at a travel agency in about 1979, and this is why it's kind of cool. And one of my daughters immediately was, I want that for my house. Okay, this is something that I made, and this is what it meant to me, and it's the only thing ever like it that I made. So, I put together some of that, and my daughters, and there are some things that I'm passing on to my brother. And I have no illusions about the idea that I'm going to live to an extended age. I probably won't. The greatest likelihood is that I have 5 years or less. And I'm going to pack as much living as I can into those 5 years. And at the same time, I'm going to make it so that the passing is with as little pain as possible to those around me. And that some of the things that have had meaning in my life that I feel should be passed on, that those who receive them will cherish the meaning of them and remember me through them.
Yeah.
Now, the biggest thing that I'm working on right now, that my brother and I have been working on for years, we wrote a short book together, and we're still looking for a publisher. The problem is the word short. Everybody who reads it says, damn, that's magical.
Yeah.
It's just over novella length, but not quite novel length. And while there have been examples of some books, like Jonathan Livingston Seagull was a very short book, Education of Little Tree, very short book, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, very short book. we have to find a publisher that will take a chance on something like this at a time when publishers of written books have really pulled in their horns.
Yeah.
There's just not as many of them. There's been tremendous consolidation, and people are looking for what's the next big bestseller.
Yeah.
And this is a thoughtful, curated collection of tales that has a thread that weaves it all together. It's not merely here's a tale, here's a tale, here's a tale. There is a connection. It has a storyteller in the tale who, as part of moving along through villages, tells a couple stories, and it works.
Wow.
I'm trying to find somebody to publish that so that my daughters can have that book in their hand and pass it on, and so that other people might enjoy it and pass it on, because it's the kind of book that I think people might read to their children, or even because it's really written for adults, that adults might read it and recommend it to each other. I want that book in print before I die.
Good luck. I hope that works for you, Bill. That's beautiful. Looking forward to reading it myself. So,
heck, I'll send it to you. See what you think.
How
Do you
do you-
happen to know any publishers?
I'll think about that. How do you find peace of mind?
By not looking for it, by
Yeah.
being it,
Yeah.
by stopping and centering myself and thinking about how much I have that to give thanks for, and how lucky I am to have my wife and my brother and my friends, and experiences like this
It's great. It's beautiful.
give me peace of mind.
Got a few more minutes here. These are 5 quick Alan Watts questions off the top of your head in just a couple words. 1, who started it all?
The first person who told something that they wanted to be remembered started it all.
Very good. 2, are we going to make it?
Forever? No.
3, where do we put it?
As much as possible where it appears to belong and nobody trips over it on the way to the bathroom at night.
4, who's cleaning it up?
That, unfortunately, we are leaving to our children, and it's not fair.
5, is it serious?
Niels Bohr, the physicist, said some things are so serious that you can only joke about them.
Wow.
And we must, yes, recognize the seriousness of our situation, but approach it with good humor.
It's really good. Gurdjieff said the laughter is the reconciliation of yes and no. But McLuhan loved to quote Steve Allen, behind every joke, there's a grievance. Any comment?
I wouldn't necessarily agree, because a great many of the jokes that I create, there is no grievance. There's merely the intent to have laughter, a little bit of cognitive dissonance where people can see things from more than one perspective at the same time.
Fill in the blank. Anger can be a productive emotion when
it gets things done that need to be done without violence.
Very good. There's a line that goes, you create what you resist. Bob Goldthwait morphed it into you are what you hate. James Joyce said, it's a curious thing how your brain is super saturated with the religion in which you say you disbelieve. And Louis Buñuel nailed it. He said, thank God I'm an atheist. So it's basically this line, you create what you resist. Not you, Bill, but one creates what one resists. Any thoughts on that line?
I don't agree with it, because of the fact that what I resist emotionally, philosophically, are things like greed and racism.
Yeah.
And I don't create those things. I abhor them.
Yeah.
From the core of my being.
If you were walking down the street today and you met yourself as a 12-year-old, what would you say to your 12-year-old self?
Don't be afraid to be totally yourself. And you'll make mistakes. And I'm not going to tell you what they'll be. Make mistakes honorably and ethically and learn from them.
Beautiful. Which way should toilet paper come off the roll, over or under?
Over. Those people who do it under are, well, never mind. That's the
Guess
anger
what?
thing coming up again.
The patent 100 years old has to go in over, but the people who say under, which is only like 10%, they have their reasons. So if a publisher was to release...
Well, less likely that the cat is going to do this.
Right. If a publisher was to release your autobiography off the top of your head, what would the title be?
Not the plan that I had in mind.
They want to scent the glue in the binding. What smell?
Jasmine. Because it is a comforting, sweet floral smell.
It is great. If a statue is built in your honor, where would you want it displayed and what would it be made of?
You're just going overboard with these questions. Let's see here. If a statue was built in my honor, I would... I would not want a statue built in my honor.
I get that answer sometimes. Tell me something good you never had and you never want.
Something good I never had.
And you never want it.
Oh, there's too many answers to that. A harem. Okay.
A harem.
Never had one.
I don't got that. I don't
particularly want one. I'm sure that my wife would probably object. A collection of big fancy. People. I remember somebody offering me a great deal on a very expensive car, and this is. It's a chick magnet. I'm married, and it's so much fun to drive. Yeah, it's nothing I've ever wanted. I'm not looking to impress anybody.
I know you got the three answers I get the most are fame, money, and heroin. So you did good. You got a harem and a car. Okay, expensive car.
Well, I have a car.
Expensive.
Perfect for me. It's not elegant, but does what I want.
If you were in a vat of vomit up to your neck and someone threw a bag of shit at your face, what would you do?
Question why I'd gone to that nightclub that
evening. Bill, you are funny, and that was a great answer. Tell me the cultural shift you see developing today that inspires you.
I look at my daughters and those of their generation, and my daughters are late 20s to early 30s. And I see that they are less judgmental.
Yeah.
That they are accepting of other opinions.
Yeah.
They certainly deplore racism. They certainly are not materialistic.
Yeah.
And they care about the future of the planet and the future of their culture.
Yeah.
In a way that I feel gives me some hope.
You're really good, Bill. This has been fun, and I just have a couple more. Thank you so much. What's a question that remains unresolved for you?
And of course, I would have to say, a question for whom that remains unresolved for me. But for life in general, or you're, of course, the way you do things, you throw open the door and let people come back.
Yeah,
with
whatever.
anything.
When you put in the context you want.
That's one of those that I probably should have something right off the tip of my tongue that's fresh and witty, but I really, when it comes to the big questions in that I would want an answer to, it's mostly about how can I pass along a an idea or concept that will make the world better
Yeah,
after I'm gone. What can I give that will outlast me?
it's really good. You've emphasized that several times. I appreciate it.
I've had to think about it lately.
Yeah. How has storytelling shaped your behavior?
When I teach, I use storytelling as a way of communicating and getting people to remember concepts. And it's highly interactive. A storyteller should not simply be a person standing behind a microphone on stage. They have to use their voice, their inflection. They use their body. A good one. I've very seldom seen a storyteller stand still. They're in motion. When I teach, I'm moving. I'm not just sitting behind a desk. I move around the room sometimes. I use my hands. I use my inflection. I do things to keep people focused on the information and getting the flow. And I treat everybody with respect. And I try and get it so that the person who sat in the back of the room because of the fact that they're shy or just didn't want to be there, so at the end of it, they feel involved and they wanted to be there.
Yeah, it's really good. Thornton said in 1928, art is confession, art is the secret told, but art is not only the desire to tell one's secret, it's the desire to tell it and hide it at the same time. You've laid your cards on the table for over 90 minutes. I'm not insinuating you haven't already answered this. What's it really all about for you?
Creating conditions in which there is emotional warmth, something like love.
Yeah.
Certainly with those that I'm closest to, I love.
Yeah.
But with friends and with coworkers, that they know that I care about them, that they are of value to me, not merely because of anything transactional, but because they're friends and colleagues and people who I respect. It is tremendously important to me that I not go to sleep with things unresolved.
Yeah.
That at the end of the day, if I don't wake up the next day, that if you'd managed to ask me that I didn't have a thing that was waiting to be said or done.
Yeah.
Now, done, okay, I've got projects that I'm behind on like every other human being on earth, but I'm saying the emotional ones, just telling people, I'm glad you're my friend.
Yeah.
I appreciate you, my wonderful daughter. I'm proud of what you do.
Yeah.
And telling my wife and my brother and other members of my family how much I appreciate how they've stood by me. And
so good.
Of course, my wife says, hey, it was in the contract to have and to hold Richard or poor, sickness and in health. I'm there. But I've known people who in that situation lost their spouses, men or women, who just said, nope, not sticking around for this, and left.
Yeah.
Mine didn't. She was standing by me the whole time.
Beautiful.
The love that I've experienced is wonderful, and I want to express my gratitude for it every day.
Gratitude.
And express your love to the people who are perhaps peripheral. If there's somebody that you respect and admire, let them know that. It could make their day in a way that you just never even thought of. If there's a friend, long-term friend or new friend, that you haven't said, hey, I'm so glad you're my friend lately, go do that. If not today, get it done tomorrow. We never know how long we have with those we love.
So well put. What gives you the most optimism?
The hope that things are better than they appear.
Yeah. The first question I asked Bill is, what is the best thing for a human being? Wilhelm Reich said, the best thing for a human being is another human being. The last question I asked is, what gives you the most optimism, is what they asked Groucho Marx at the end of his life. And he said, other people. So it's sure been fun spending this time with another person, especially because it was you, Bill. Thank you so much for your time and energy.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah. And even though I'm going to hit the end broadcast button now, I hope this never ends and we keep talking forever and ever.
And that would be enjoyable.
Thank you so much.